Perfect. So welcome again. It is a pleasure to be hosting this event today with such a talented panel of guest experts. I welcome you all and thank you to all the speakers for your time here today as well. My name is Julia Fauci. I will be your host for today's event. I am a marketing strategist and business coach with over 12 years of experience, and I specialize in working with women solopreneurs in the early stages of their business. In the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are fortunate to be able to gather on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. And as we're getting started, I do encourage everyone to close your tabs on your windows and just give yourself the time to be present during this event so you can truly learn and assimilate the content that we are sharing here today. I know that we live today in a world of multitasking and that we are doing like 1,000 things at the same time. But what happens is we end up not assimilating anything when we try to do all at once. I am guilty of that at times. I have signed up for webinars in the past, and I tried to listen to the audio while I was doing other things. And in the end, I had to actually rewatch the entire thing because I didn't assimilate any information. So save yourself some time, just be present, participate, engage on the chat, take advantage that the presenters are live here and that we're going to have live Q&A as well. So you can take advantage of that time live here today. So as we're getting started, we're going to have three main sections for today's presentation. First, we're going to have Matt Berezan. He's a financial advisor with Edward Jones, and he has some guests from Fidelity Investments who will be talking about taxes and investments for small business owners. So that's our first presentation for today. Next, we're going to hear from Hasan Chen. He's a CPA accountant with Truspect Consulting, and he will be sharing more tax considerations, especially around incorporating your business. And to wrap the event today, we're going to hear from James Struthers, who is the founder and lawyer at McCush Law, and who will be sharing some legal considerations when incorporating as well. So to get this going, I'm going to start introducing Matt to you. So Matt from Edward Jones, he has a couple of people from Fidelity for our first presentation. Matt is an Edward Jones financial advisor who has a passion for numbers and investments. So much so that the moment he graduated from high school, he began investing in the stock market and enrolled as a statistics major at SFU. However, it was his genuine enjoyment for working with and supporting others that ultimately led him to pursue his career in financial planning. Prior to joining Edward Jones in 2019, he spent 14 years with TD Canada Trust as one of their top 10 financial advisors nationwide. When he's not with his 3 children, he enjoys experiencing everything the world has to offer through travel, food, and especially language. He's fluent in both English and Korean and continues to learning other languages. When you choose Matt as your financial advisor, you can rest assured that you are receiving the utmost care and enthusiasm as he works together with you to achieve your goals. So I'll pass it over to Matt Berezan from Edward Jones.
Thank you so much, Julia. As an Edward Jones financial advisor, I'm always looking for strategies that help my clients save and invest, and whenever possible, save on taxes. Speaking of one of these strategies, certain mutual fund structures can create a competitive advantage, allowing you to earn greater after-tax returns and optimizing your cash flows over various timeframes. This strategy is most popular among my individual and corporate clients who are looking to invest outside of a registered account or life insurance product. Today, I'm introducing you to Nathan Lowe from Fidelity Investments, who will introduce our guest speaker, the leading member of Fidelity's Tax and Retirement Research Team, and who will be sharing with you more about this excellent strategy I use with a lot of my clients. Nathan, take it from here.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate it. So again, I'm Nathan Lowe, the Fidelity Business Development Manager that partners with Matt. For those new to Fidelity, I just thought it'd be helpful if I could just quickly highlight 3 key things on Fidelity's advantage as a partner. So number 1, Fidelity is the world's largest privately owned fund company. So like Edward Jones, being privately owned allows us to make these long-term decisions, especially in the markets we saw last year where there was a lot of volatility. So as opposed to focusing on the short-term earnings growth to public shareholders, we're always having that long-term view. Number two, in terms of our compensation, unlike our competitors, our portfolio managers are paid on outperformance of 3 years and 5 years, as opposed to being paid assets under management. So this puts our PM's interests aligned with yours. Anybody could have a good year, but our PMs are paid to do it consistently. And finally, we have a team of 850 investment professionals at Fidelity where we build our proprietary research. We never sell our research, which gives us that competitive advantage. With that, I'm super happy to be joined today by Michelle Monroe, one of the resources Matt can leverage. She's Fidelity's Director of Tax and Retirement Research. Michelle joined Fidelity back in 2008 and has been a leading member of Fidelity's tax team. Before joining Fidelity, she was also the Senior Manager of Taxation at Ernst & Young. So Michelle?
Matt, Nathan, thank you so much for that warm introduction. And Julia, team, it's my absolute pleasure to be here today. So as we alluded to, I am going to be talking about some tax efficient strategies that people can use for non-registered accounts, not just within a private corporation, as well as you could use them as individual for your non-registered account. So this is not for your RSP, TFSA. These are our non-registered accounts, and we call them they're tax smart solutions, and they're specifically for business owners. So let's get into it. So when it comes into tax planning, what are we trying to do? Well, we're looking at the tax treatment, meaning the tax rate, and paying the lowest tax rate that we possibly can today. The second component of that is trying to defer taxes. So the timing of that. So if we can pay that decades into the future, delay paying that tax bill, if you will. And whenever we can combine both of those techniques, that's a winning tax strategy. So we have two solutions that I want to go through today. But before we do, we're going to look at some of these are the top marginal personal tax rates. These are weighted average, population weighted average. So the top marginal rates, which kicks in about $250,000. So what we can see here, I'm just going to annotate ordinary income, which is interest, foreign income is least tax efficient. The next two things we want to think about is, well, eligible dividends, which are dividends from public corporations typically, are more tax efficient. Capital gains has a 50% inclusion rate from that ordinary tax rate, even more tax efficient. And a return of capital, the 0% tax rate, it doesn't get better than that. And we'll get into how you can achieve that as well. So looking at these are the tax rates across Canada, personal tax rates. So we're going to get into our solutions. The first one is looking at corporate class funds. And when people think about mutual funds, they're usually thinking about trust mutual funds, mutual fund trust. And I'm emphasizing the word trust because this legal form is important. And mutual fund trust, the character of the income that it earns is retained when it gets distributed to the unit holders. That's you, the investors. And so if that mutual fund trust earns interest income, foreign income, which is foreign dividend income, that ordinary income, which is least tax efficient, that trust will distribute it to the unit holders. Least tax efficient. So thinking back to our tax strategy, least tax efficient, we don't want that ordinary income if we can avoid it. Which leads me into the corporate class, which is over here on the right-hand side of my screen. Now, a corporate class is a mutual fund corporation. And when people think about mutual funds, they don't think about mutual fund corporations, but it's a special type of mutual fund. and it's written into the Income Tax Act. And as a corporation, mutual fund corporation, it's just a special type of a Canadian corporation. And the distributions that Canadian corporations can make are those more tax efficient dividend income, Canadian dividend income, as well as that capital gains dividends. So corporate class, so we have corporate class funds. They have potential for lower distributions, which are more tax efficient of Canadian dividends as well as capital gains distributions. So how we achieve that is through, with Fidelity, we have 88 class funds, and they form one class structure, which is one taxable entity. So we're able to pool all of the expenses and all of the income, and we use the pooled expenses to offset that ordinary income first. And then when there's leftover expenses, those are used to offset capital gains. And so this is how we get that tax efficiency. We get those capital gains dividends and Canadian dividends. So this is somewhat of a complicated chart, but what does it mean using some numbers? So what I did here is I have a comparison of a class fund and a trust fund. And what we're doing is we're looking at those distributions over the 7 years worth there. And when you look at the total distribution for the trust and compare that to the total distribution of the class fund, it's lower. And then is when we look at the character of that distribution, looking at capital gains, Canadian dividends, it even gets better because the character is even more tax efficient. Whereas on the trust version here at the bottom, we'll also have that foreign income, which contributes to this. And we're able to do that because of the pooling for all the class funds in the class structure. And if this is of interest for you, we can draw this comparison for any trust or class version of funds. And we can look at that over 7 years. And you might have an anomaly in 1 year where we have a swing, but you're thinking about this as a long-term investment where you'll really be seeing this, reaping these rewards over the long term. I'm a tax accountant, so I often make jokes, and it's but there's truth to them. So watching the pennies or the nickels and the dimes, because we no longer have the penny, but watch the nickels and dimes and watch the dollars take care of themselves year after year. So talking about, okay, well, who are corporate class funds for? So for your registered accounts, your RRSPs, your TFSAs, you don't get the same benefit there because they're tax deferred. The money gets reinvested in the tax deferred vehicles or tax-free vehicle. Now, somebody who is a lower or middle income, meaning they're in the lower middle tax bracket individual, corporate class funds are for tax efficiency. So if you're already in that lower middle tax bracket, well, you're not going to get the same tax savings that you would. Corporate class funds are really for highly taxed investors. And so there's two buckets there, looking at the individuals whose personal income is at that high or highest tax bracket, and private corporation business owners. And we're going to get into that in a second. But the second tax smart solution I wanted to talk about was tax smart cash flow. And what this is think about when, and again, this is for non-registered investments. So think about someone who's saved up their non-registered investments and now they've moved into retirement. And what's happened is they want to draw down some of those non-registered investments. How they would typically do that is they would set up a systematic withdrawal plan. So every month they're selling units of their mutual fund. It could be a mutual fund trust or a corporate class, but if we're doing the right things, we're in corporate class with those non-registered investments. And we're selling units of that mutual fund. Now, every time you sell units of the fund, you're triggering a capital gain. Capital gain means that you're getting a tax bill. Now, there's a better way, a more tax efficient way to be able to obtain the same or similar cash flow. And it's called tax smart cash flow. And what it is a series within a fund. And we call this the T series for tax smart, T series. And it's T8, which is 8%, or T5, which is 5%. And what it is an 8% or 5% of the fair market value of that fund. And then you could receive that cash flow on a monthly basis. So if the 8% or 5% is annualized, so then you get a cash flow on a monthly basis, so it's 1/12 the annualized amount. But what it is that you're not disposing of units to get that cash flow. And because if you're not disposing of units, you're not triggering a capital gain. And if you're not triggering a capital gain, what's happened is you still receive that cash flow, and it's a return of your original investment capital. And that, going back to that tax slide where I had all those tax rates, a return of capital has a 0% tax rate, meaning it doesn't get any better than a 0% tax rate. Now, what it is it's actually a deferral of the capital gain. But that deferral could be years, if not decades, into the future. Now, one of the things that people like about tax smart cash flow is that you can turn it on or off, if you will. And how you do that is you switch from your regular series into the T series, you turn it on, and you can go anywhere up to that 8%. And you can turn it off by switching back into that non-T series fund. As well as we recently introduced a customizable amount. Because what happens is when we do that calculation of, say, that 5%, it comes out to $1,234.73. And somebody just wants $1,000. So we're able to customize that to $1,000 if that's what you're looking for. And again, we can adjust it. So people really like the flexibility. So I wanted to show you, how does this work in action? So this is someone who has a $5,000 investment, and they're in a balanced class fund. And so they've just stayed invested for 10 years. Now this blue line, I should clear this off, this light blue line across the bottom here, that's the adjusted cost base. And here, the darker blue line going up there, that's the fair market value. And what we can see here is the bars at the bottom here, here's our bars, is the cash flow. So this individual waited until year 10 to start this. And the real advantage is here, they're sitting on that capital gain. So if they had done their systematic withdrawal plan, every time they're selling units, they're triggering a capital gain. Now, doing the tax smart cash flow, receive the same cash flow, and what they can do is that's all return of capital. And so what happens is they would get, whether when they sell the units or that adjusted cost base hit 0, then there would be a taxable event. But as you can see, you could get that return of capital for years, for decades. And what this means is if you're lowering your tax bill today using tax smart cash flow, well, you can keep more money invested and watch your money grow, more compounding returns. So that's something to be thinking about here. So that's one of the benefits of tax smart cash flow. Now, well, here we go. What I want to get into next is, well, we've talked about these tax smart solutions. How do we use them in a private corporation, corporate investing? So let's talk about, well, the challenges of that corporate investor. It's a much more complicated situation. And this is where we can support Matt to give you the best solution possible. But it is more complicated because you're trying to balance your individual wealth, which could mean investing in RRSPs, it could mean TFSAs, your own personal consumption, buying a house, a cottage, what have you, as well as within the corporation side, building that corporation and growing it. And often what happens is that people are very successful inside their corporations, and they end up with investments inside the corporation. So what do they do with that excess cash inside the corporation, specifically looking at investing it? So let's first start talking about, well, what are some of the tax benefits of incorporating? Well, the tax benefits are on that active business income. And I often use the example of a veterinary who's incorporated. The first $500,000 of the active business from veterinary, taking on that, is taxed at a low tax rate, 11% in BC. And there's also income, there can be some income splitting opportunities as well when you have a spouse or children working in the business, as well as there's succession planning opportunities when the shareholder business owner sells the shares of that veterinary business or what have you, that business, they can sell those shares and the business will continue on after that owner manager is no longer involved. As well as when you sell those shares, there's if it qualifies, there's the enhanced capital gains exemption for qualified small business shares. And that is almost just over $900,000 of the capital gain associated with the sale of those shares is eliminated. So meaning it's tax-free. So that's pretty substantial when it comes time. But I want to focus on, well, what does it mean for investing inside this private corporation? And I'm going to share some of the tax rates here. Now, when I use the term private corporation, the technical term is Canadian controlled private corporation, but I'll just use the term corporation, private corporation. So on that active business income, and we're talking about the veterinary business that's incorporated, but it could be anything. I'm just using that for my example. The first $500,000 of active business income has a low tax rate of 11%. The amount above that $500,000, it's a higher tax rate at 27%. Now, if I was a veterinary and I was incorporated, and I earned not incorporated, and I earned $500,000 of business income, a sole proprietor, I would be very quickly into that top tax rate, 53.5% in BC. So there's a significant tax savings to being incorporated. So that's what many people are thinking about. Now, on the right-hand side, I want to focus on the investment income inside the private corporation. Now, the corporation would pay corporate taxes on that investment income. Now, an ordinary income is 50.7%, and capital gains is half of that. It gets the same inclusion rate that individuals have. And dividends, I get taxed at 38.3%. So I want to show the next page here, is taking a deeper dive. Stay with me. I know we're going into some of the nitty-gritty of taxes here, but I'm going to pull all these pieces together. So stick with me here. So really focusing on the investment income inside our private corporation. What happens is the corporation earns investment income. It's ordinary income. It's at 50.7%. Capital gains are at half of that. And the Canadian dividends, 38.33%. What happens next is, well, the corporation, if and when, and it's more of a when, but it doesn't have to do it annually. When the corporation pays a dividend to its shareholder, the corporation gets a refund. It's called a dividend refund. We're looking at, on ordinary income, we're looking at about 30 2/3% and the full amount on the Canadian dividends. So what does this mean? Stick with me. So that's the effective tax rate at the private corporation level. But this is only half of the picture. I'm going to take these numbers onto my next slide. The other half of the picture is, well, okay, the individual, the shareholder now receives a dividend. Typically, that's a non-eligible dividend. And let's just assume our shareholder is in a top marginal tax bracket. So the individual would pay 48.9% on that non-eligible dividend. On the right-hand side, it's the eligible dividend, it's 36.5%. But I really want to focus on the middle column here. So the combined personal tax rate, both the corporate and the personal tax rate, is 59.1%. So we paid taxes at the corporate level on this ordinary income. We paid taxes on our personal level, and it's combined 59.1%. Whereas if we had held that investment personally, the top marginal tax rate in BC is 53.5%. What this means is that if you keep if you earn investment income personally or inside your private corporation, earning it inside the private corporation, let me go back here. Remember here we have that 50.7%. Earning it inside the corporation and keeping it inside the corporation, you have a lower tax rate than if you'd earn that interest income personally. So what many investors do is that they keep as much as they can inside their corporation. But we'll get into some of but we still want to pay as low tax possible. So what I want to do is I have an example here. It's Will and Susan. The real key piece is on the next page. And what we're doing here is that we're saying, okay, well, they have $2 million invested inside their corporation. And they're earning ordinary income at $50,000. And what I wanted to do is compare that and say, well, how can I use corporate class? And that ordinary income will get recharacterized as a capital gain. So 50% of that is taxable, so only $25,000 is taxable. So this is trying to compare a trust version of a fund that distributes 100% ordinary income versus a class version of a fund and distributes capital gains. And we want to keep the amounts the same. So we're going to keep my numbers simple, using a 50% tax rate. So on the trust version, we have $25,000 of taxes. When we pay out a dividend, now we don't have to pay out the dividend every year, but let's just, in our example, we're going to assume it gets paid out. Keeping the numbers easy, we're using a 30% tax rate for that dividend refund. So $40,000 gets distributed to the shareholder. Now looking at the class side, we have a taxable capital gain of $25,000, corporate tax rate at 50%, $12,500, dividend refund, we can distribute $45,000 to the shareholder. And I'll get into on the next page, how did we get there? So taking my numbers forward. So we have the $40,000 there that we're getting from the trust side, option one, comparing that to the class version. And so what this is it's the 25,000 of the 45,000 there, 25,000 of that was the tax-free portion of the capital dividend, of the capital gain, and it gets paid out as a capital dividend account from the capital dividend. And the shareholder receives that tax-free. So $20,000 of that is taxable. And so then on our 40,000 versus the 20,000, the individual is going to pay personal taxes at that at 47.5%. And then the net shareholder gets 21,200 using the trust version, and the individual who used the class version gets $35,600. It's an increase of $14,400, which really, this is showing the real power of using class funds where you get a capital gain distribution instead of the ordinary income distribution, and it is much more tax efficient. And this is at 14,000 every year. So there's some real tax savings there. Just a little bit about the capital dividend account. It's part of integration. So it should mean that it's a notional account. And this is just an illustration of it, is that we're looking on the left-hand side, we have a capital gain, it's $100. 50% of it is tracked in the capital dividend account balance. It can be paid tax-free as a capital dividend to the shareholder, personal tax on that. So it's important to be tracking that year in, year out. Once you get a significant balance, talk to your tax accountant, pay that out, a tax-free dividend. Who wouldn't want a tax-free dividend? Okay. A little bit about private corporation tax changes. Now, private corporation owners will remember, because we feel very passionate about this. It was the summer of 2017, and the Department of Finance introduced some new legislation. It was kind of the summer, and I think they sort of thought, oh, we're just going to sneak this in. Well, people aren't really paying attention. But for private corporation business owners, it was they really feel quite passionate about this. So there was 3 areas that they covered. There was income sprinkling, which is income splitting. Most people have dealt with that already. On the right-hand side, there were proposals that were about converting dividends into capital gains. Those proposals were since rescinded. The section I want to talk about is holding passive investment income in a portfolio. And what does that mean? And I'm just going to slide along here, because we'll show this on the graph. I think this is a better illustration. What this is, and remember, we're talking about that active business limit, the small business limit, that first $500,000 gets that low tax bracket, gets that low tax rate, 11% in BC. And so it was the government's perception, I'm choosing my words carefully here, it was the government's perception that small business owners who are incorporated, because of that low tax rate on the first $500,000 of active business, they were able to save more inside of their businesses and accumulate too large investment balances inside their corporation. So what they did is they introduced, we refer to these as the passive income rules. And what they did is they introduced these passive income rules. So what they're doing is they're tracking the investment income. And as long as the investment income is $50,000 or less, the taxpayer gets the full, or the corporation gets that full $500,000 business limit. But for every dollar you go over that $50,000 threshold, that business limit is reduced by $5. So once you hit $150,000 of investment income, that business limit is fully ground down. So you get 0 of it gets taxed at that low 11% tax rate. Now the amount in excess of that is taxed at the 27% tax rate. So what many business owners are thinking, private corporation owners are thinking, is that they're very focused on that $50,000 and keeping their investment income below that. So what the next slide goes into, well, what contributes to that $50,000? Well, we're looking at interest income, foreign income, capital gains income, but only 50% of it's only the taxable portion. So that 50% of that. And so this comes into play is where corporate class can come into play. Because corporate class, well, we have potential for lower distributions. Those distributions, you're more likely to have capital gains distributions, only 50% of that is taxed, as well as we're going to add into that capital dividend account. So this is when you have a private corporation, you're thinking about investing. Well, first off, we want to try to keep our taxes as low as possible, corporate class. as well as if you're concerned about this $50,000 investment income threshold, again, corporate class could be helping here. I should also point out that there's a 1-year lag. So we're looking at investment income for 2022 that will impact the business limit for 2023, as well as when we're looking at associated companies. So if I have my active business here and a holding company there, we're looking at those combined together. So I believe I am right at time. So that wraps up my formal presentation. So the key takeaways is that, well, I do want to wrap this up. The key takeaways here is that when you're thinking about non-registered investments, there are some solutions to help you reduce those taxes you pay today and defer them into the future. And also the character of those taxes. Let's get a lower tax rate on Canadian dividend distributions, as well as capital gain distributions, lower tax rate as well. So these are some of the solutions that we have, and we work with Matt to make sure that you're paying as little taxes as possible and keeping more in your pockets.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michelle. I think you shared so much that I didn't know, that I feel like I would need a meeting just to learn more about the options. Some of you here may know that I incorporated my business last year. So this is my first taxes that I'm filing for the corporation. So I'm still kind of learning everything. And definitely the next step is learning how to better manage my money, like separating the corporation from the person. And learning investment options. I think it was very relevant personally to the stage I'm on. And I think it's very relevant to what Hasan and James will be bringing on as well. So thank you so much, Michelle. Let me just remove this pin.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, so next, I'd like to invite Hasan here, who actually is the one going over my first tax nightmare with my corporation. Oh, wow. Anyway, Hasan is an entrepreneur and business consultant who works with private corporations and families in Western Canada and Asia. He has a track record of success in various settings and a strong background in accounting, tax planning, and business consultation. He has helped countless business owners and families to achieve their goals. Hasan also believes the importance of giving back to the community, so he volunteered for a government-registered nonprofit organization for 10 years and acted as the treasurer for 5 years. In his spare time, Hasan enjoys traveling, photography, and outdoor activities. So thank you so much, Hasan. And Hasan will be sharing a little bit more about is it time to incorporate and what the considerations you should have before making that decision.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks for putting this together. Thank you for the leadership. And Michelle, that was a great presentation. Just a quick look on top of Michelle's presentation. Unless your parents give you a few $1 million to live in Vancouver, assuming you're entrepreneur, business owner, hardworking people who building your practice and your business. So having your investment keep being taxed when you earn money is like, try to collect water with a bucket with hose, right? So Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So we, no doubt that we all work hard to have a better lifestyle. We hardworking people will worry about our money. So we want to make sure that our money is working as hard as we do and not to get slaughtered by the CRA. So everybody can see my hands, right? Because of the virtual background. So having the investment keeping taxed is like you grow your money, you piggy bank, and you get taxed, and you grow and you get taxed, right? Versus if you talk to Matt and Michelle and Nathan, and you can have a shelter so that your wealth can keep accumulating, right? And you can leave your money to your loved ones, a charity instead of the government, right? So remember this, posture, right? Grow and get taxed, grow and get taxed. Instead, you want to keep on growing your piggy bank until, the piggy bank is huge. Okay, so Michelle talked about a little bit incorporation. I'm going to talk a little bit more. If you have questions, leave it till the end. Can everybody see my screen? Yes, no, Julia, good. Okay, so yes. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk. I'm going to do a little bit introduction, and I don't know if I can share the video with audio, but if I don't, you can Google Tax Freedom Day. I'm going to talk about that as well. Tax rate, I think Michelle talked about that a little bit already. Yeah, so this is a little bit background about myself. I used to work in industry and public practice, and yeah, volunteer quite a bit as well. And focusing working with small to medium-sized business owner is is my everyday job, right? So I'm kind of losing my voice because tax season, having lots of meeting, talking, and giving advice to people and business owner. Okay, so if you look at the dates, what it means is that on January 1st to June 15th, if you add all the tax Canadian have to pay, the GST, the PST, the corporation tax, personal, like everything, like property tax, foreign transfer tax, you can basically rap a song. If you add up all the tax you work for the government or the system, you don't get to keep anything. So starting June 16 to December 31st, you work for yourself, your family, your hobby, your travel fund, right? So if you look at the day, it actually is getting worse, right? We're keeping less money because in 2021, the tax freedom day was actually May 24th, but now it's June 15th. I don't have the stats for 2023 because it's still early, right? But you can just Google it and watch the one minute video, right? So I think Michelle talked about that. I don't have to talk about that a little bit more. I can give you some example when you are planning to incorporate your business. It's like having a child, right? Your corporation is a separate entity. It's like your son or daughter, right? So it is another individual that I know that you own 100% or 50% of the shares of the company, but you have to think it that way, right? So pros and cons, we talk about limited liability before. So imagine you run a restaurant, a coffee shop, a troublemaker bring in a buck and then toss it into the coffee and take a picture, post it on IG and say, oh, like, how could you run a coffee shop, like this, right? Sadly, health authority comes, you lose, and then your reputation is kind of ruined. So what you could do is that you can wind up the corporation and incorporate a new one, and you can change the name, right? For professionals, let's say you're a surgeon, doctor, lawyers, accountants, architect, engineers, we are personal liable. So if you're a surgeon, it doesn't matter if it's your fault. If the patient died in front of you, I think the association is going to give you a call and you better explain everything. But if you're doing most of the businesses, there's this limited liability, right? Ability to raise capital when you're growing your practice, your business, you want to buy some machines, you want to buy a piece of land, you want to buy the office. Usually when you raise capital, people inject the money into your company, not to you personally. Okay, so the cons is going to be more fees involved, more paperwork. There's a learning curve. I call that is a learning. It's like it's a wall. It's vertical. Like a business owner, you have to manage everything, right? The potential for making more money, to grow your practice, to achieve your dreams is, the sky's the limit. But the learning curve is not a curve. I say it's like a vertical wall. It's like a climbing up the wall. That's how I put it. So it's not easy. And lifetime capital exemption. If you if you sell your business, you get a credit 900,000, approximately. That's going to be no tax. And then the last one is my favorite one, is also Michelle's favorite one, is the tax planning and also the strategy, right? So I also got some track record I can show you that how powerful tax planning can be. Let me quickly share it as well. Okay. So this is a husband and wife case. You can still see my screen, right? It's loaded. Okay, good. Okay. So this is the case that I've done back in 2017. before the COVID. So the husband making 100,000, 120,000, the wife's making 120. They sold a rental property. They have been living inside the property for a number of years, and they rent it out, right? And they get a bigger house, and they sold it. I utilize everything. I asked them, hey, you have to max out your RSP. And they also live with grandma, right? If you live with parents, grandparents for over 65 years old, you get a Canada caregiver amount. Of course, there's going to be like a checklist you have to make sure that you go through. Yeah, they have 2 children. They get $8,000 of child tax benefit. They are not getting any Canada workers benefit because they make too high an income. Get a little bit of GST, PST pay. Eventually, I generate a value for this family in 1 year, $36,000, $36,000. So if you look at the revenue they generate for the family and the corporation, so the husband is paying 5% and the wife's paying like 9%. Okay. If you look at the government benefits, this is some money that you get from the government, right? So yeah, so this is something what we do every day, and I know this kind of stuff is not like watching a movie. It's not fun. It's quite technical. we try to do our best to present to you so that it's easy for you, and as part of our job. But managing your tax payment is super important legally, right? You don't want to keep growing your wealth and then you get right. So yeah, thank you. Back to you, Julia. Julia, you're on mute.
Sorry, I am on.
problem.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Actually, before I jump into James, I do have some questions because I know we have quite a few people here who are thinking about incorporating. So just before I introduce James, I have a question. Hey, so what do you think? Sorry, just the mic. Someone's mic is on. Okay. What would you say are the main things to consider when thinking about incorporating? Like, when is it the right time to incorporate? So someone is already running their business and they're just not sure if it's the right time yet. How would you support with that?
I would say when you make it depends on your income, right? Just by incorporating your business, you save approximately 25% of tax. Don't forget you have to pay for CPP as well. The maximum amount of CPP is around 7,000-8,000, right? As a business owner, you're your own boss, right? So you have to pay the employer and the employee portion, right? So 3,000 plus 3,000, 3,500 is almost 7,000-8,000, right? If it's under your sole proprietorship, if you make high income, you have to pay the CPP as well, right? So let's say the net income is, let's keep it back. So let's say the net income is 50,000. The average tax rate for personal income tax, I would say 35%. And the corporation tax rate is 11%, right? So let's say the difference is 25%. So we do 50,000 times 0.25. That's like, $12,500, right? So just by incorporating, you're saving a lot of money and control how much to pay yourself. So yeah, and pay yourself a little bit more just to get a mortgage to buy a house. That's another story, right? So yeah, so I hope that answer your question.
Yeah, so I guess it really varies on each person's situation and how much income they're making. So if you are considering incorporating, I would say, I would highly suggest just talking to an accountant like Hasten, just to see your particular situation and see if it makes sense for you, because definitely it's not for everyone. It does depend, as Hasten mentioned, on how much you're making right now, and you can kind of plan for that right time to come as well. So in the end, I'm going to have a screen with everyone's contact information, so you can reach out to both Matt, Hasten, and James as well if we have any follow-up questions. And again, we will have our questions Q&A in the end. So passing it over to James, and I'll just do a quick introduction. So James is a passionate, optimistic, giving and driven member of the BC Bar. He cut his teeth at a national firm in securities and corporate law and a regional, indigenous, and business law boutique. Hailing from a family of entrepreneurs, associateship was short-lived for James. After a few years of experience and observing and experiencing some of the issues that traditional firm structures can create for lawyers and clients alike, James founded Makush Law, a modern digital by default, tech-forward legal practice platform, as opposed to a traditional top-down pyramid law firm, intended to provide lawyers firm-like supporters while providing the freedom and flexibility of solo practice. So James provides corporate, commercial, and real estate services to impact businesses, nonprofits, and charities. So please welcome James. Thank you so much for your time here today, talking also about legal matters to consider when incorporating your business.
Thanks, Julia. The bio was a mouthful. I didn't make it easy on you there. And thank you, Hasten and Michelle for the presentations. Those were great. I learned a lot as usual, and I'm really happy to be here today to talk about this issue. You know, I started as a solopreneur. We work with a lot of solopreneurs, and it's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. So I hope I'm able to provide some value to you today, and let's get into it. So just quickly about Makush Law, we're founded in August of 2020. We're now 5 lawyers and 3 staff. We are one of 3 benefit company law firms in British Columbia, and our B Corp certification status is pending. Still waiting for that to come through. We're not quite a full service law firm yet. We are about to enter a recruitment campaign to continue to grow our service offerings. Right now, we provide corporate and commercial real estate, residential real estate, employment, wills and estates, civil lit, and then a little bit of traffic and personal injury as well. One of our lawyers provides. So many of our clients and trading partners ask us what it means to be a benefit company. So just very briefly on that, it means that we have enumerated formal public interest aims along with profit. So in addition to being a for-profit company, we have to pursue the achievement of certain public interest aims. And there's limits on what can or cannot be public interest aims. Ours are focused around affordability of legal services, community contribution, sustainable practices for our lawyers, more sustainable ways of practicing. Our industry often reports on the high substance abuse and mental health issues and actually suicide rates of practitioners in the legal industry. So we're trying to provide a better way to practice that's safer for lawyers, more sustainable, as well as environmental harm mitigation and mobility accommodation. So there's a number of different ways that we achieve those aims. And we are mandated under the legislation to report on our performance once a year. And so if you want to read the full report, it's pretty long. So you're going to need a good half a Sunday likely to read the whole thing. But just pulling up the stats we're really proud of. We donate quite a bit. We provide a lot of discounted rate services and community contribution time to our communities. And we did really well on our B impact assessment, which is our third-party standard that we use to measure our impact. And we're growing quite rapidly. We're really proud of our collections rate. Our clients are usually happy to pay their bills, so that's great. And our lawyers work quite a bit less than their big firm downtown colleagues. So, and then just quickly about me, I was born and raised in Winnipeg. Still a reluctant Jets fan. I graduated from UBC Law in 2017. I'm a corporate commercial real estate lawyer, and like Julia said, I primarily work with solopreneurs, small businesses that are often impact enterprises, and then nonprofits and charities there as well. So that's a bit about us. The structure of the presentation, there's sort of going a little bit beyond the incorporation considerations here into some additional services, but speaking first to the incorporation process, or whether or not to incorporate, something I'm very passionate about is modernizing client intake and client service, which you kind of have to be up to speed on what's happening in the world in terms of client expectations and available tools to be competitive nowadays, and then just some general business advisory as well. So jumping into the first topic, choosing a corporate form. I think you heard Hasten struggle with that question a little bit, and it's not because Hasten doesn't know how to answer it. It's because there's just no golden rule or magic number, right? There's so many factors to consider, depending on the type of business, your risk profile, the level of income, how many employees, do you have investments you're trying to protect? Are you planning on having a family trust? What's your growth plan? It's a complicated analysis. So the income tax piece that Hasten was chatting about is usually one of the key, usually the first key consideration. Solopreneurs are taxed as individuals, corporations are taxed separately, and the number matters because there is double taxation. You would be taxed at the corporate level, but depending on how you pull your money out of the company, you can also be taxed as an individual for the income you earn from the company. And those calculations are fairly complicated. And so no matter where you look on the internet, no matter which person you consult about this question, they're going to say it depends. It's complicated. Let's have a conversation. But one of the key considerations on the legal side that we're more attuned to in our practice is liability. So the riskier your business, the more important incorporation becomes. But there are other considerations as well that we often advise our clients of that can make the number matter a little bit less, especially if you're trying to grow. So business legitimacy, being a company, having that company in your contract can add a lot of weight to your business, to the way that it presents to the world, rather than just a trade name or a sole prop. There are a number of tax efficiencies beyond income tax that we heard about from Fidelity. Dividends, there's tax-free dividend amount you can take out. There are life insurance policy and loan backs that you can create, and then family trusts, holding companies. There's a lot of options for tax efficiencies that become available only once you incorporate. And so those are usually additional considerations. And sometimes the focus is a little bit too much on exactly what the number is, and not so much on some of these other considerations about liability protection, protecting your personal assets, and also if you're going to grow, you're committing to this business project. Let's think long term here, because if you're planning on operating a profitable business, you're likely going to get to that incorporation moment at some point. It just the numbers may not be now, but you're getting there. And on the liability piece, this was mentioned a few times. So just briefly, the corporate veil is really that liability protection that a company provides. So you go out into the world as a solo practitioner or a solopreneur, you provide services or goods to the public. If you run over someone's foot, or you sell someone something that doesn't work or hurts them, you breach contract because you're having a tough month in cash flow. If you have a trading partner that is upset with you, they can go after your personal assets, your home, your savings, your kids' education fund, your car. So big doom and gloom, these things, there's a process to pursuing that, but you're much more exposed when operating as an individual or a sole prop. With a company, you have this corporate veil. So shareholders and directors in these small enterprises are protected. There are a few ways that claimants can still pierce through this corporate veil. Employment liabilities, if you have staff, and environmental breaches, the CRA can come after you personally for not paying your taxes. So there's a few ways through that corporate veil, but very few. And so protecting your assets, it still matters for both companies and individuals. On the corporate side, your aim here is to protect the company's viability and its assets. Obviously, there's costs involved with having to wind a company down, satisfying claims. You don't want to be bankrupt. You don't want your company to be bankrupt, because that can cause all kinds of issues personally down the line. And so the ways that companies tend to protect themselves, especially early on in operations, is getting adequate insurance. It's a big first step, but also written agreements with adequate liability protection, and that's our role. For sole props, protection of the business's viability and assets is important, but you're also trying to protect your personal assets and viability. So insurance is even more integral, and well-drafted agreements are even more integral for sole proprietorships. So just quickly, when you do incorporate, I think it's good to just start at I don't know where everyone is in their journeys here in the room, so I don't mean to be pedantic by talking about this, but always worth a quick mention. So what are shares? Very common misunderstanding in the public is that shareholders own a company. They don't own a company. They own a bundle of rights in relation to that company. They own the right to dividends, to vote, to retract or redeem their shares. There are bundles of rights that are essentially an investment contract with that company. And shares are a form of an investment property. So they have a capital value and they can generate income, but it's not actually ownership of the entity. No one owns a company. And for us, when we're advising small businesses, solopreneurs, usually we apply the keep it simple, stupid approach to incorporations. We almost always suggest incorporating to very new businesses with just one or two classes of common shares. When we get to these more complicated reorganizations, rollovers, creating a holdco, estate freezes, we're going to get an instruction memo from an accountant at that stage, and we'll know exactly what kind of share classes we need to create. Often we find when we're doing those reorgs for companies that already exist that we haven't incorporated, we're having to make amendments to the share classes at that time anyway. So try and keep things really simple. If the company's been in operation for a little while as a solopreneur, then we might suggest you've got some value there. You want to do a rollover. Maybe we need to make sure that we've got the right classes there in addition to common shares to make that tax efficient. I mistitled this slide, but I just want to speak to corporate names. So you can see I was rushing a little bit to prepare for the presentation here. So I am more and more finding that companies, new business owners are not taking the time to investigate protection of their names at the outset. We just had a little while ago a client come in asking us to help them with a trademark. We did the search and it turned out that they couldn't trademark their name, and moreover, they couldn't engage in the trade that they had intended to. They were pouring a lot of money into a new project, and they would risk infringing someone else's mark if they decided to carry on with that project under their existing name and brand. So they're forced with this impossible decision. Do we risk getting in trouble with the people who own this mark, or do we start from ground zero, redesign the logo, redesign the website, redesign all of our marketing materials? It's a really difficult situation to be in, and it's very easily avoidable at the outset. So you could search to ensure that you're picking a name that's not already protected when you go to incorporate, and corporate registrations for a name are not sufficient. I promise, Julia, I will tidy this slide up when I send it through to you if you're circulating the materials to all the attendees, so that I've got that in there. But it's important to look at this from the outset. So this registry protection is very limited. It's worthwhile if your name is very important to your business, the value of your goods or services, that you apply for that mark right away. It takes often a year and a half, even 2 years to get that mark, but they backdate protection to the date of filing your application. And just so that we're able to communicate a little bit our pricing around some of these items, speaking to the complexity of incorporation, we do provide a really low cost sort of let's chat, let's have a conversation. We can give you some things to think about, or maybe even advise whether you should incorporate or not. We do sole prop registrations, basic incorps, and trademark searches and registrations. We actually do have a lower cost, just a search component here that we can assist with in addition to the actual filing. But all of our prices are because we're digital by default, we try and stay a little bit lower than the prices of our downtown competitors, the big firms and mid-sized firms. We also do annual maintenance for corporations. The next subject here is modernizing client intake. So why modernize? Clients are demanding this more and more. They want ease, they want convenience, they want to be able to jump into a relationship very quickly. And it's a huge competitive edge. If you have a very easy way of getting clients in, you're going to have an edge over your competitors. You can increase your volume and profitability through automations and forms and click wrapping agreements. It's never been easier or more affordable to employ these tools. They're all right at our fingertips. And there's a huge opportunity cost if you, over the long term, are spending time on parts of your business that are able to be automated or streamlined, you're giving up potential revenue. And you'll also, when you do start to grow, potentially have some staff will likely be much more satisfied and happy to stay with your business if they have very easy tools to use in performing their services. And you also don't have to go out of pocket. I was recently chatting with a CEO of a fairly large digital marketing business that said these Canada Digital Adoption Program grants are woefully underapplied for. So they're actually quite easy to obtain. You want to make sure you have your application prepared properly, but there's a way to apply for those, and there's lots of funding available. There's a $2,400 grant, but there's also a $15,000 grant and a $75,000 interest-free loan that you can apply for. And that can be used for e-commerce, for digital marketing, for automations, building your own extensions if you want to get into doing some hiring programmers to build you custom work, IT infrastructure maximization, and software development. So quite a few different uses for it. And what do I mean by modernizing intake and service? So this is a very poorly made process map, but it's a tool that developers use to find ways of condensing processes. So they map the whole process out click by click, action by action first. And then they identify which of these accordions can we shrink with an automation. So this is what an inefficient system looks like. It's very typical of a law firm, a traditional law firm, getting a new client. So you get an initial email, you schedule a consult manually by email back and forth. You follow up with a proposal for a quote. You manually go and create your draft agreement. You send that to the client for review. Sometimes you've got to negotiate and make changes to it. Manually circulate that for signature. Sometimes the client has to print, sign, scan, and return, which is becoming a very old school process now. Hopefully you get retained at that point, but all of these first few processes involve you as the business owner taking action, doing things, all time that could be saved. Then you go and get information from your client, you open your file, you do the work. You're going to be manually scheduling meetings with your client throughout the course of the file. You complete the work, you manually prepare your bill, you manually deposit a check or e-transfer, and you rinse and repeat. This is not a profitable system anymore. And this is what an efficient system can look like if you're using the right tools. So you get an initial email or call. You can use an automations tool to send an automated email out. Use another system to get all the information from the client that you need to enter into an agreement with them. And that agreement can be click wrapped, browse wrapped, use wrapped right there in the process so that when they complete the form, they've agreed to your terms. The client books you using a booking system. And at this point, this is the first thing that you have to take action to do. An actual human behavior is reviewing that intake and prepping for the meeting. So you're taking that really cumbersome process here and cutting down your obligations and also the steps. The client's process is easier. There's so many hours that can be saved here. And then also nowadays you can auto-generate bills. Client can pay the bill online. And again, you rinse and repeat, but at least your process over and over and over again is repeatable. It's short, it's automated, it's slick. The client's going to be happy. You're going to spend less time. So why am I as a lawyer talking to you about business practices? In my view, we should be doing this as lawyers, but we don't. Lawyers are risk averse. but we also don't fully understand our obligations under our code of conduct, in my view. So we have competency obligations, and lawyers should be keeping up to date with how the law is developing, but the law doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a marketplace. And so we need to, as part of our competency obligations, be able to understand how our role interacts with our clients' businesses, operations, activities. And we also have an obligation to provide efficient services. And we need to find ways to make your life easier, and not just offering services that we're comfortable with, but services that will make your life easier, reduce your costs. These are part of our obligations as counsel. So I spoke to these fairly briefly. Click wrapping, browse wrapping, use wrapping, and digital signatures are common tools used to form contracts that don't require someone actually printing a document out, signing it. And so what we're doing in these processes is that we're taking the time to understand how your system works, maybe creating a bit of that process map on our end, and we draft contracts as well as language for use in these applications that are perfectly tailored to the system that you use. So you can ensure that you have a binding contract, and it's formed in a way that costs you less time, expend less energy, use up less of that precious time that you have as a solopreneur. And we're very familiar with a number of different IT consultants, different programs that you would be using, and can draft to suit those processes. And in Canada, we have some fairly significant consumer protection issues that apply to these contracts of adhesion. So that's something that we can assist with as well. Just really quickly to pricing again, we try and provide on alternative rates. So we have a fixed fee contract review product that we can offer. Depending on the length, this could go up. This is our base. And we have, if you went to get a custom services agreement from any firm downtown, you'd likely be paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a Word document that you have to manually generate. So we try and come below that. And again, this would be tailored to the system that you use for automating client intake. I am noticing I'm over my time here, so I'm just going to very quickly speak to business advisory. So sometimes legal issues come up on a rolling basis. We get it. I'm a business owner myself. All of our lawyers are business owners because they operate independently using our systems. So we understand how difficult it is. Issues arise. You need help from time to time, and you don't want to be afraid of this big scary bill coming in the mail. So we have free 15-minute consultations. We try and provide you tools during those calls that will help you help yourself. And then we take that opportunity, if there are services, we might propose some services that would be helpful to you in solving the problem that you have. And so those are free. And then we do offer hourly services from time to time, starting around that 200 per hour rate. And then we set these flex fees, which are limited scope, limited price services, so you know what you're paying for. So sorry for going over time. That's it for me. Thank you, Julia.
Oh, no, that was great. Thank you so much, James. Let me get back. I think maybe you can stop sharing your screen so we can get back and seeing everyone. Yes, thank you. This was great. I really love about the automation part. This is actually something I'm very passionate about. And I have a module about building systems and processes and using technology in one of my mastermind programs. So definitely love that. And yes, I'm going to open for Q&A. Thank you again for all the speakers. If you have any questions, now it's the time. You can raise your hand and I can manage to open the mics in order. And while I'll let a minute for everyone get settled with their questions, I do have a question for you, James, actually. When you're talking about annual maintenance for corporations, what's kind of included in that? Like what are things that people should be aware of that they need to be taking care of every year?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I'm going to start by speaking briefly to corporate records. So when people incorporate themselves, they don't often understand what the Corporations Act actually requires in terms of records. Of issues over the long term. So when we incorporate professionally for that rate. So you get the full corporate records. We make sure your shares are issued properly. All that's done correctly. And then the annual maintenance is ensuring that every year, as required under the Corporations Act, that we're preparing and filing the right documents in your corporate records.
I don't know if it's just me, but James' connection, is it me or is it James? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's frozen.
Okay, so I think James froze. All right, so yes, we'll take any questions if anyone has any, and I'm gonna just share a screen with all the speakers' contact information. So you're free to reach out and book in a free consultation with either of them, whoever you have questions. Can you see my screen? All right, so we have Matt, who is going to be speaking for Michelle. I don't think she's here any longer, but if you have any questions about investing and finances, Matt is your guy. So his information is here on the screen. Also Hasten for your accounting needs, and James for your legal matters. And I'm here as well as a marketing strategist and business coach if you need. And I do want to mention as a last note that all of the four of us, we are part of a business networking group where we get to meet a lot of like-minded small business owners, and we get to learn a lot from each other. It's a really great community. And if any of you would like to join one of our meetings, you're more than welcome to. If you're interested, you can email either of us and we can set up an invitation for you to join this. It's an online business networking meeting. So it's definitely a great place to connect. All right, I don't see any questions coming in. So I'm just going to thank everyone again for your time. Yes, please feel free to reach out to all these resources that you have here. Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, see you next time. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks so much. See you guys later.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Thank you.